Good morning. Thank you for joining us on this morning's It's Learning webinar. My name's Matthew Jordan and I head up It's Learning Sales. I'm joined today as well by Lucy Pollitt and Jade Ward from the Growth Company. For those of you who haven't seen our webinars before or perhaps aren't familiar with It's Learning, I'll give a brief introduction of who we are and then I'll hand over to the guys at the Growth Company to walk you through today's topic. So we are an online learning platform, or a VLE as you may hear it called, and we're actually Europe's largest online learning platform with over 8 million users across K-12, further education and higher education. Prior to the pandemic, we've been working closely with training providers, and as you can imagine, this has then been accelerated since lockdown. That's due to really providers looking at how they can deliver online, how they can deliver from different locations, and with a combination of independent and tutor-led activities. And It's Learning is really proud to call Growth Company a customer of ours. It's been great to be part of their digital transformation journey over the last 4 years. And one of the things that they've toyed with over the last few years, and something that we hear actually from a lot of providers, is we do have a VLE, do we need an ePortfolio solution? Or reversely, we have an ePortfolio solution, do we also need a VLE? And if so, how and what does that look like? So rather than just sit here and tell you that our VLE is the absolute best and that there's nothing else worth looking at, we thought it would be useful to showcase if and how a VLE and an ePortfolio solution can work together, and also highlight the great work that Growth Company have been doing to adopt that best of breed style approach. So before I hand over to Lucy and Jade, just a very, very quick bit of admin. The webinar will last around about half an hour, 40 minutes. We will allocate some time for questions at the end. So if you look on your control panel, there should be an option for questions, and you can just type your questions in there throughout the webinar and we'll take a look at them at the end, collate them, and we'll do our best to answer them. So thank you again so much for joining us, and I'll hand over to the guys at the Growth Company to walk you through the content for today.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Lucy Pollitt, I'm the Head of Quality at the Growth Company, and I'm joined by Jade Ward, who is our e-learning lead. So as Matt said, we want to talk to you about kind of the developments we've had over the last kind of 4 years and about kind of getting a ePortfolio and a VLE to work together. So just a bit about the Growth Company. So we're a wider company and we work for the education and skills part of the group. We're a grade 2 training provider with over 30 years of experience. We do deliver apprenticeships, study programs, higher education, adult provision across a wide range of sectors. So some quite kind of technical like construction and engineering, health and social care, professional like business admin and management, HR and financial services as well. So we are quite a large training provider and quite varied. So going from like study programs at kind of level 1 and level 2 right up to higher education programs at kind of level 7 across a kind of wide range of sectors. So we're quite diverse really. We are kind of in the middle of a transformation project within the organisation, very much focusing on kind of digital transformation, and it's all really about kind of improving our services, engaging in more people, and how, you know, kind of looking at efficiencies and kind of our impact, and all that. Digital is kind of a key part of that. So we have had kind of significant investment in digital technology. And that includes kind of new systems to look at kind of tracking the learner progress and digitisation of our learning materials. So it has been a really kind of positive experience that actually, you know, the organisation has really kind of invested heavily in this, and it's had a real kind of positive impact, and it's meant some quite significant changes in education and skills.
Our journey with It's Learning really started back in 2017 when we first purchased it. We did buy it to replace a previous VLE that we had called Solve, which was used quite well with our HE team, sorry. So we did sort of get them using It's Learning first, and because they were quite, you know, good adopters of Solve and use that quite regularly, we did kind of think that, you know, they'd be great to sort of start with. What did happen, though, like a lot of times when you try to like change systems, is that they did use It's Learning as a bit of a repository at the start. So they just put everything that they had sort of transferred over into the new system, no real structure and organisation there. So coming to January 2020, we sort of took a step back and had a look at how it was being used, and as well as the sort of limits and what you can do with It's Learning and the potential that it had within the system. So we did a lot of exploring within it, looked at some of the reports and the features that wasn't widely used in our company, and thought about how we could really sort of improve the learner's experience if we started to adapt some of those. So in January, just before sort of COVID hit, we did actually start to put together some plans around developing like a bit of a blended learning strategy and putting digital developments in place for all the programs. We was looking at recruiting a couple of e-learning content developers and starting to grow the team to sort of improve what we had and make a real go with It's Learning to sort of make it a good system for our learners to improve their experience digitally with us as well. And then sort of as COVID hit sort of in March, we all went into lockdown, as you all know. It definitely did increase, and I think really sort of helped staff see the potential what a VLE can do and how it can support your learning and your teaching. And it's sort of, I think, made everyone more aware how important it is. So we do have, you know, before COVID hit, we probably did have a few questions from staff saying, you know, is it worth it? We've got an ePortfolio. Why do we need a VLE with it? But as soon as that happened, everyone's like, right, yeah, I kind of get it now. And we have everyone sort of, you know, wanting to do digital developments, to bring some stuff online and sort of complement the teaching that's happening as well through Zoom webinars and workshops, as well as some classroom teaching that we've returned to. So yeah, it's been a big improvement.
And I think now what we're doing is really kind of taking stock of where we are with that and kind of just putting a plan together. You know, actually as things are kind of returning to normal, we're identifying where we want to keep these kind of online learning aspects and parts of the program. So it's kind of really now kind of starting to look at that and really kind of think where we're going with the blended learning and what we want that to look like. So part of this then is just thinking about kind of the question of ePortfolio or VLE, because like I say, we've been using It's Learning since 2017, but as an apprenticeship provider, we have been using a kind of separate ePortfolio, and as part of the digital project, we wanted to look at the systems. We wanted to improve our reporting on kind of learner progress and the learner journey. So it was starting to look then at what kind of products were out there and what we wanted kind of out of the systems and what that might look like moving forward. And obviously, you know, we were kind of already had a few years working with It's Learning and wanted to continue with that, but how we could get something else to kind of complement and, you know, look at some of the kind of the funding audit requirements that kind of how else we can kind of add to that. So we started looking then and identifying what we wanted the system to do. So it was about obviously kind of what we were currently doing on It's Learning, with some of that kind of learning resources and engaging with learners. But there was a kind of key things about recording the learner journey and tracking learner progress. I think it's come to the fore from, I think, the move from apprenticeship frameworks to standards. Where actually we're moving away from qualification tracking and tracking the knowledge, skills and behaviours. That's been a huge thing for us, and we had various kind of manual tracking things in place, such we have like grading profiles which track kind of the progression of knowledge, skills and behaviours throughout the apprenticeship programme, but actually we wanted a system where we could record that and actually report on it. And obviously it's kind of big focus for Ofsted is about that kind of tracking of that knowledge, skills and behaviours. I think it's been a big journey across, I know it has been for us, but across the sector, about that move from frameworks to standards and how we track that if there's no qualifications involved. So that was a huge thing really for us. Recording off the job hours was obviously a huge thing we needed to consider. Really, and I'm sure the kind of providers in the same position, that actually we had lots of information, lots of different places, and it was very hard to kind of compile that and report on it. So reporting was a key thing. Attendance, again, another thing. We have actually quite a lot of classroom-based sessions. We have kind of off-the-job sessions, but also classroom sessions for study programs and HE. So wanted to get something to record that accurately. Compliance and quality requirements, We did want kind of the teaching and learning materials, and obviously we talked about kind of the digital and online kind of materials as well. So we wanted something that had capacity for that. And communication between staff and learners is a key thing, just kind of making sure that that's clear, that's you know, effective, and just kind of the different ways we can do that. So we were looking at this, you know, this is what we wanted out of the systems, and kind of going through that process of what might sit where and how we might kind of organise this information and what systems we wanted to use for that. So what we've done is obviously we keep working with itslearning, and that's what we wanted to do. So we've made the decision and kind of really tried to be really clear on what we wanted to use each system for. So teaching and learning materials, feedback to learners on work all sits within itslearning. We have got kind of the reporting coming out of that as well, submission of assignments, communication between staff and learners, obviously in itslearning, and some of that evidence in the sequencing of curriculum learning all sits within itslearning, and that works really well. And we've kind of got some really good examples of where that's been used well on study programs, higher education, and on apprenticeships. So it is very much like that kind of teaching and learning activity all sits on itslearning. And I think that's, like I say, we've got some really good kind of success stories that Jade's going to talk about in a moment, about kind of how that's worked really well. And then so what we've done then is we made the decision to go with Smart Assessor as an ePortfolio, and that's where a lot of our progress tracking sits. So obviously we do use information from itslearning, but in terms of the progress tracking and kind of reporting, that is coming out of kind of Smart Assessor. So actually, where we have got activity taking place in itslearning, whether, for instance, on our study programs, they submit their work on itslearning and that's marked on itslearning. What we're doing in Smart Assessor is just ticking off kind of and marking units as complete on there. Yeah, the progress tracking of those learners is in Smart Assessor. We've got the contact with learners, and we've got contact, whether that's kind of group sessions, and we've got kind of the sessions built in, or whether that's kind of one-to-one in a workplace. So all that every contact with learners sits in there. Recording of the job hours sits in Smart Assessor, and also we have got feedback. So obviously you can see that there's some of these things go in both systems. So obviously feedback to learners sits in Smart Assessor, but that also obviously is in itslearning as well, where that's feedback on work. Reporting, it comes out of there, and attendance has been quite a significant part of this, because we have, like I said, we've got kind of off the job training sessions, we've got big classroom sessions. So actually that was a kind of significant part of it, and it's quite a lot of work gone into that. So I think that's it's been a learning journey for us in terms of attendance, but it has kind of worked well so far, I think. We've got communication again between staff and learners. Again, that sits within both systems, and that evidence in the sequencing again in both systems. So we have got, I touched on earlier talking about the tracking of knowledge, skills and behaviours. We've actually built that into Smart Assessor as well. So we made this decision to kind of separate those two parts out of it. So the VLE really is about like kind of teacher and learning activity, with some of that assessment as well, assessment and feedback in there, and actually that kind of tracking of the learner journey sits within Smart Assessor.
So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about how we're doing that for apprenticeships now and how we're using itslearning for that. One of the key things I think for us is to improve the learner's digital experience with us, and especially around the teaching and learning side of it. Because, you know, historically, I think people were used to a lot of workbooks, a lot of pieces of paper sort of floating around and worksheets and stuff. So we want to try and get away from that as much as possible and sort of come a little bit up into the 21st century and have some digital stuff that can be accessible sort of anytime, any place, anywhere. With the apprenticeship standards, we do have all of our programs roll off, roll on. So, and that's across our study program and across some of our HE courses as well. So we do have learners sort of join in as and when they sort of approach us really. So it's not really any like sort of set start date. So because of that, really what we're going to do with itslearning is have all of that key information from the programs on the system, on their course. That's there as soon as they sort of log on and access it. So in It's Learning, what we've done is we have created these start pages, like you can see on the screen there is a little snapshot of one, which does hold sort of all the information around, you know, who they need to contact in terms of the tutors, key safeguarding information, whole overview of the programme and the progression that can come after it as well. And we also cover things like, you know, anything around the apprenticeship standard, endpoint assessment processes, any sort of like key assessment points throughout the year, depending on the length of the programme as well. So we do try to sort of gather all of that key information for learners, so at any point in the course they can always reflect back and sort of see and read about it, or sort of refresh their mind about it. So each course that we have on It's Learning, we do have a start page like this, so it does give them a good snapshot of information every time that they log into it. We're also using the plans in It's Learning to provide some structure and sequence around the courses. So like Lucy said before, around, you know, we do have some of that sequencing in It's Learning around the learner journey and on Smart Assessor. The difference in how we're using the two systems is in It's Learning, we're having like a more of a generic structure of the programme. So we've got the apprenticeship plan here that you can see. So we split it down into 3-month chunks there, and we sort of saying, generally, when you start on this programme as a learner, this is how your programme is sequenced. Now, depending on where they start in terms of like additional tuition, so if they're doing additional diplomas, certificates, or other qualifications alongside the standard, they might sort of join a unit, or they might start in terms of the start of a unit there. So we have sort of separated those out separately, but in terms of like the work learning that they're doing in the workplace, tying any qualifications and the standard into the everyday job and what they're doing, we've got sort of a general sequence of how things would happen. So, you know, understanding business awareness first, and then progressing into using certain software and things like that for the accounting one. So we do have a bit of a guide on It's Learning. It is attached to a lot of information, as you can see here. So we've got a snapshot of month 1 on the right hand side, so you can see, you know, what we're covering, what they're supposed to be doing in the workplace, or linking it back to the employer all the time, and tasks that they can do with the employer that will help them bring that learning together. Any sort of on-programme assessments that we'll be doing throughout that month as well. So if we're going to be doing like professional discussions with them, making sure that they're aware of those so they can prepare for those, and bringing in any sort of portfolio evidence they need to create. So we'll provide them with some like classroom learning around that, as well as some possibly some bite-sized standalone pieces as well. So all of that sequence of the general structure of the programme, so what their apprenticeship looks like, is all based on It's Learning with the teaching and learning resources there. On Smart Assessor, what you're then going to see around the learner journey is that individual learner journey and the individual sequencing of it. So a lot of the system in Smart Assessor, a lot of their journey, you'll see every session that they've booked into, what targets and things have been set, all of that contact that's been recorded there, but it all links back into the It's Learning system, and you can see clearly what part of the programme that they're working towards at that moment. Sorry, why is this going a bit funny? Yeah, so we've got the same sort of thing going on in two systems, but two very clear different purposes there. We also are starting to create our own bespoke digital content as well. So trying to sort of improve on that blended learning strategy that we're trying to bring in place, of having good digital resources that will complement both Zoom delivery sessions and classroom delivery sessions as well. So we bought some software content to help us produce that, and we also have an e-learning content developer on our team, as well as a couple of apprenticeships that we're recruiting for. So they'll sort of work with the different teams to help create sort of bespoke bite-sized pieces of learning that they can add to It's Learning that will help complement all of that classroom teaching and workshop and on-the-job training that they're doing with them, and that makes up the off-the-job hours. So really sort of helping to sort of bespoke It's Learning and make it sort of our own through doing that as well. Just touching on the reporting as well, and how we use the reports in It's Learning to sort of link to Smart Assessor and how we track the progress in there. So in It's Learning, there's an assessment record, and we use this sort of really well within certain areas of our company and in our programmes. So the assessment record, you can link to any assessments that you create on It's Learning, like quizzes and assignments. You can also add your own in there as well. So if there's like practical assessments that you're doing with your learners, you can add that into the assessment record as well, so it's all in one place there for you if you want to. What we are doing is making sure that we categorise those assessments really well. So putting them into topics, like you can see here, awareness of stress, and you can see clearly, where learners have submitted those, where work's sat there waiting to be marked, and where the gaps are as well. So the work is very clearly labelled in It's Learning, which helps us monitor it, and it's then signposted in Smart Assessor. So in Smart Assessor, they are ticking off the boxes to say this work's completed, but then signposting it to it's here on It's Learning. It makes it very easy for us then to go to It's Learning and see where that work is very, very clearly by helping sort of keep it really organised on there. The other report that we use on It's Learning is a 360 report. It's kind of a very invaluable report. I think it sort of goes through, activity progress and grades of assessments you do on there per learner, and it gives you a really rich source of information. So you can see, every time the learner's logged on, what times of the day they're logging on, really sort of deep dives into that information, tells you how many threads that they've communicated on every time that they've replied to a comment, and it goes into as well, every single aspect and element of your course that's made up of it. So, from your information pages at the start to all of your resources and assignments and tests you've got on there, it tells you when they've done them, when they accessed them, how long they were on that for as well. So it does give you some good information around that you can use to sort of make sure learners are engaging with your programme and help you sort of identify whether or not as well a little bit more clearly. So those two reports are sort of really invaluable, I think, to us in terms of helping us monitor what's going on in It's Learning and helping us link that to Smart Assessor by sort of linking them together and doing a little bit of signposting, which is great. We are still sort of on a bit of a journey with this, so we have still got some future developments that we're working on. So we are introducing a learner portal that will help us link the systems together. So because they're both two separate systems, they don't really talk to each other, and we have sort of sat with both of them and tried to get that to happen, but there is a lot of limits there, as there is with lots of different softwares. So the way that we're going to get them to work together is through single sign-on for the learners, and it's going to go through a learner portal. So the learners get their own education and skills email address, they'll then log into the portal when they can then single sign on to both Smart Assessor and It's Learning. And with that as well, we're getting them like a Microsoft Word package, Microsoft Office package, so they've got access to their own emails, education emails, and Word and Excel, all the basics there of the Microsoft package. So that'll really give them sort of a good sort of digital experience with us, as they've got access to the learning, the progress, where they're up to on the course, and then the tools to be able to sort of do some of that work as well. We've also got development plans in place for all programmes across all sectors. So we're looking at sort of getting everyone sort of standardising the sort of experience a little bit, so making sure they've all got information pages, that they've got the plans and the sequence of the curriculum sort of really well laid out on It's Learning. They're then doing a lot of training with Smart Assessors to make sure that they're recording that learner journey individually really well on there, and doing any linking in to the system. So we're trying to sort of stay away from duplication as much as possible, just use signposting and make sure each of the systems are set up in a well organised way, so that you can see what's happening between them. We are also recruiting a couple of additional apprenticeships to produce the content and support the development of the resources there. So still sort of improving on sort of our blended learning strategy, and including sort of good bite-sized digital pieces that will complement all our courses, and doing that sort of across all areas with wherever's needed. So we're working really closely with the tutors and the sector staff to do that.
So just some learning points for things that we have learned over the last few months. So one is being really clear on the system requirements. So actually kind of establishing what you want from the systems. And then we went through this process of looking at various different products and what they did, and making those decisions. And so obviously we made that decision to stick with It's Learning for the VLE, and then look at Smart Assessor for the ePortfolio. So kind of making sure that actually between them they met our system requirements, and being really clear then about how we're going to use each system. I think actually I did think we'd get more questions about why we were using two systems, and I think that's only really come when people haven't had much involvement with itslearning yet, where people are already established on itslearning and you know, using that really well. There were no questions, they could see absolutely, and they were really clear on actually this sits in itslearning, this is the you know, that teaching and learning part of things, and actually then the kind of the tracking is on Smart Assessor. So actually, like I say, people were using itslearning well, they could really see that. Excuse me. Sorry. And that made absolute sense to them. So it is just being really clear on that and knowing what we're doing on each system. A key thing is about avoiding duplication. We were conscious that, you know, we are still using two systems, and that is an issue to consider for tutors and learners. And it is about, say, avoiding that duplication. What we wanted to do, and Jay's touched on it, was just about the signposting. So in terms of the reporting and the progress that's coming out of Smart Assessor, but actually we're just putting those links in. So if the work has been completed elsewhere, that is clearly signposted, and just when we're signing units off, you know, we're actually signposting that that's in itslearning, and that was really something that we wanted to be really clear on, and like I say, just kind of reduce that duplication. And also make it clear for learners, and I think obviously that's where the single sign-on will come in as well, just to kind of reduce that. But I think we knew that there were lots of multiple tracking documents across the business, you know, with the spreadsheets, and so we wanted to, you know, we knew people were doing that kind of admin work already, but actually we're just doing it in one place now. So it is that kind of tracking in Smart Assessor with that progress, ticking off the units, but then we clearly just link into where that work is in itslearning. I think that is working well, and like I say, I think just there are some areas where we need to do more work on in terms of development of itslearning, but we have got a plan in place for that. Another thing is about a thorough training plan, and I think that's I just can't emphasize that enough, really, and I think it's probably just planning more training than you think. So as we are, some teams are more established with itslearning, some are fairly new to it, but obviously we've brought Smart Assessor in this year over the last few months for all teams, and just in terms of that, it is just, you know, doing the training, actually, you know, training, there's then smaller group training with specific teams, one-to-one training. So I think that's the key thing, and that's taken a lot of time, but obviously we know that investing in that time on the training is really going to have a positive impact. So just say make sure that that's, you know, it's thorough. It's what we're moving to now is if we've had the kind of the training on the systems, and it's now about kind of standardization of the use, so making sure kind of people within the teams and across teams are using it in a similar way, and we've got that standardization in, and again that's kind of part of the plan that we've got in place, kind of the next stage of it. And the last thing really is just about kind of being realistic about the systems, and just think, you know, actually no system is perfect. And I think I don't know if other people on this call have looked at various different kind of ePortfolios and VLEs, and actually we found we didn't kind of see anything that could do everything. And it is about kind of being really clear on what you do want out of that. Actually, if you're going to make that decision to use two systems, like I say, I think it has worked for us, but it is just being clear about kind of what you're doing on each system. And actually, there might be a few gaps. You know, there might be things that you might still need to do in a different way. But I don't think I've seen a product that does everything. And it is just about kind of just selecting the best of, you know, of each one. And getting that good combination, which I think we have got in place now for with both itslearning and kind of Smart Assessor working together. I think that's it. So I don't know if anyone's had any questions.
Perfect. Thank you both so much. That was really, really interesting to see how you've managed it and how you've worked it. Like I mentioned, it's a question that we do get asked a lot around how ePortfolio tools work together with VLEs, and particularly how it can work together for learners as well as providers. So it's really interesting to see kind of how you guys have done it and how it works. And if it is something that is familiar to people on the call, then we are offering consultations following the webinar where we can help you review that estate and advise on the best path Obviously, we would love that path to be itslearning, but if for any reason we don't think that's the best option for you, then we are more than happy to tell you that, and we can help point you in the right direction either way. I've seen there's a couple of questions come through. You may have answered a couple of them, I think, as you've gone through, but I'll ask them anyway. Firstly, how have your learners found having both platforms and navigating between the two?
I think it has varied. I think we do have quite a wide range of learners. So we have obviously the main cohort, I suppose, is our apprentices, and I think so far I think it's gone quite well. I think, like I say, it's us being clear on what we're using each system for, and I think actually they do like to see that kind of overall learner journey and the progress on Smart Assessor, but it is being clear, and then kind of actually they do engage very well with itslearning and the activities on there. I think in other parts of the business it's probably quite different. So using it on our study programs, I think probably our learners need a little bit more support with that, and using the systems we tend to find there's a lot of issues with forgetting passwords and things like that, which obviously the single sign-on will kind of help to resolve. But I think a lot of the kind of study program learners we're doing like the progress reviews on Smart Assessor, so making sure actually they'll be sitting with a member of staff and doing that with them, and then they just kind of do their kind of sign in and adding their comments on. So I think actually with apprentices it's worked really well, and I don't think we've had really any issues with that so far. And I think, like I say, single sign-on will just kind of make that even smoother.
Brilliant, thank you. And then you have already touched on this right at the end, but we've been asked what training have you provided to staff? Perhaps it might be useful just to kind of go through any ideas of what's worked really well, or any part of the training program that you think has been particularly successful.
I think it is a kind of, I think just be acknowledging that you're probably not going to do one training session and that's enough. And I think we probably maybe thought that a little bit at the beginning. And I think I would say make use of any training provided by the provider. So obviously kind of itslearning on Smart Assessor, making use of the training that they provide, but then it is about supporting that with follow-up sessions based on your own kind of policies and procedures and the way you're going to be using those. And I think that's a key thing for us, is that we've done kind of the standard the training, the generic, but then actually working with the teams, looking at our kind of work instructions, policies and procedures, making sure we're doing that with the teams. And then I think it's then as part of that identifying any kind of further support, as in kind of the staff that we've done one-to-one and extra sessions with. And then I think I touched on it earlier about like the standardization. Then actually then once the kind of people are up and running with the systems, it's making sure you've got a plan in place about looking at how that's being used, and just say standardizing that, because we are quite a big company, we're quite diverse, actually thinking about making sure that learners on a auto apprenticeship are using that in a similar way to on a health and social care kind of apprenticeship. Obviously there'll be kind of differences in the content, but we want that to be standardized. So I think that's the next phase that we're going into now, is making sure that that's kind of across all programs there, and that standardization.
Perfect, brilliant, thank you. So last question, unless we get any more through, by all means, if there is anything burning, stick it in the chat and we'll cover it off. But the final one is, in terms of then evidencing work and things for Ofsted, how have the platforms helped with that, if at all?
So they haven't come yet. So in terms of kind of planning for that is like I say, just being really clear on where things are. So in terms of that kind of learner journey and the learner progress, that is in Smart Assessor, and there may be kind of learner work on there as well. But where things are sitting in itslearning is just making sure that that is signposted. We've had some visits from EQA, so obviously awarding body visits, and again we've kind of got the two systems there, and it wasn't an issue because we were kind of signposting that. So actually the IQA records sit in one system, but as long as actually they can see where that evidence is. So I think it's just being about being really clear on that. And I think actually itslearning's got some good evidence. we know that on It's Learning we've got good evidence of learner work and also the feedback to learners, and I think that's really good. You know, we know that actually that's going to be some really good evidence, and all we just need to do is just make sure that, you know, that's a signpost. So I think actually, although it is the two systems, we can be very clear on that, and actually we think it is quite easy to find as well. Fingers crossed when Ofsted come.
Well, good luck for that. So I don't see any more questions. So Lucy Jade, thank you so much again for sharing your story with us and showing us the kind of impact that the platform's had. I hope that has been useful for everybody, and thank you everybody else for joining the webinar today. As I mentioned, what we'll do following this, we'll send through an email with a link so you can watch it again, in case I know a few people missed the very start. So we'll send through the link so you can catch up and also share that with any of your colleagues. And there'll also be information on there about how to book in a consultation with us, should you want us to take a look and try and help you with your digital transformation journey. So thank you everybody once again for joining. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks.